Let's face it, when you're cold calling, you're interrupting somebody. You need to get to the point very quickly, and you need not to waste their time. And you need to understand that, and this is going to sound bad, but they don't care about you. They don't know who you are, and you're the one interrupting them. We've got to get there quickly, and we've got to give them a reason to listen to us.
It's time to reinvent.
Welcome to Lessons of Entrepreneurship, the journey of reinvention. As always, I have an amazing guest for you. I have Robert Poole here with me, co-founder of Total Biz Results. Love that name, Rob, because we're here for totally business results. So excited to have you here. Please let us know who you are and what your mission is.
I own a B2B cold calling company. We started about 22 years ago by happenstance and grew from zero to millions of dollars in sales, and all by accident, but that's the way life turns out sometimes.
It takes a special breed of person to be in cold calling for that long and be that successful in cold calling. Maybe you can tell us how this accident happened. It's quite interesting.
Yes, this would have been 1996. Around that time, I got out of the Army here in the United States. I did a couple of sales jobs originally, and at that time, cold calling was still really the primary way that, particularly in business to business, if you didn't have money for advertising, which I didn't. So I learned to do that out of necessity. But a friend of mine and I started a web design company actually in 1998. And if you remember way back then, and your audience is old enough to remember that, very few businesses had websites at that point. And so it was particularly small businesses, and it was quite the uphill battle to sell those because they didn't even know what they were. And so we tried to build that business with cold calling. And one day we had a client of ours, a website client, that said, "Boy, your cold caller that called me was really good. I'd like to use her for my business. Can I rent her, so to speak?" And we thought, "Oh, okay." And then we had another client ask us the same thing. And pretty quickly we realized there was more demand for our cold callers than there were for our website design service. So we literally folded the website design company and started this new company focused on doing B2B cold calling for businesses. And it just really grew from there. So it wasn't something that I went out intended to do, but it just, sometimes God just got plans for you that you don't quite see it coming, but that's how we ended up with that.
That's amazing. Sometimes you're trying to sell something and people are like, we don't know if we need that. Everybody now has a website. But at that time, what was that like to try to explain? No, you're actually going to need it. We have people in our audience who are trying to sell things that they feel, gosh, educating the customer on the fact that they need this. Is this worth it? Should I keep doing this? And I love that you had that experience.
Yeah, it's interesting in a couple of ways. I'm glad you brought that up because looking back, of course, that's 25 years ago or so. I was young in my career, and typically what we do as entrepreneurs is if we're good at something or we enjoy something, then what do? We want to go out and start a business based upon that. I've learned that's the backwards way to do it, that we should look, what does the market want versus what do we want? And that was a lesson that I learned through that we thought, geez, everybody should have a website. It just makes sense. And I think it was a good idea. We had some great clients and we were able to get them websites and help promote them and all that. But it was more difficult than it was when we had a product that was in high demand with the cold calling. That was a big lesson to me as an entrepreneur, to kind of watch the behavior of people. It's that old duct tape marketing concept where not only do you have to take feedback from what your customers and clients are saying, but you've got to watch what they do. And in our case, we found that we were watching what they do, that the feedback was clear that there was more demand for this one product than there was the other. I never set out to be the cold calling company back in those days, at least in the United States. The 90s was probably the height of residential telemarketing, where people would call you all day long at the dinner table and bug you. Telemarketers were just very low on the scale, we'll say, not very well liked. And that was about the last thing that I ever thought I'd be involved in. But it is a different animal when you're doing B2B. That sort of residential or consumer-based cold calling has gone away, at least in the United States. I don't know what it is in other countries. So it really is, you have to look at your product or your service and say, is there demand for this? And if you're getting resistance, it's either because you're not explaining it in the terms that they can understand, or it just isn't there. And sometimes it's a really hard truth to realize that there just isn't the demand. The market isn't there for that, which is hard to accept. But hey, if we want to survive in business, we have to take a hint, if you will, if that makes sense.
I know that's such a difficult point to be in. Sometimes you're so in love with what you wanted to offer. Like you said, sometimes you stop with what you're good at. But the path with least resistance, at least, is the path to go. You've got such a wealth of experience. I wish I could ask you a whole bunch of things about a whole bunch of things. And I would too. But for today, we have entrepreneurs who are just starting out in business or people who have small businesses that they've got going and they're thinking of methods of getting leads and methods of reaching their customer. And I think cold calling, you're the expert. Maybe you can start with what is it, and then we can go from there.
Yes, absolutely. Cold calling, there's of course different types. A lot of people think of cold calling primarily over the telephone, where you're literally just picking up the phone and calling a list of businesses in this case that are not expecting your call. And you're trying to either get an appointment with them to come visit them and talk to them about your product or service or sell it right over the phone. Certainly in person as well. That was how I got started. I was doing real estate, literally door to door. And then I later got into telephone type of work. But I think the one distinction that people need to understand is that cold calling these days, we are talking only B2B, meaning selling to other businesses. It's not a consumer-based thing because if you get a solicitation over the phone these days, at least again in the United States, you can pretty much count on it as some kind of scam. So it's not an ineffective way. So that's your first thing that you have to look at. A lot of businesses, because we've got so many options now with digital marketing that we never had before, a lot of people forget about the whole idea of cold calling. But there actually are some real advantages to it, particularly with businesses that sell B2B, of course, and those that sell generally higher ticket items. As cool as social media and email marketing, SEO, and all the other things we have, we are in a world where we're a little bit disconnected from each other because personally, even though it's great that here you are across the world, literally, we're having this conversation, which is awesome. And it's a little bit different with video because that adds to it. But as we all know, you get disconnected just online. We crave that human connection, and cold calling, conversing over the phone in particular or in person, brings a little bit of that back, that human need that we all have. So it's got an advantage to it that people forget about, as well as I think they also forget that one of the benefits with something active like cold calling is that you're calling somebody, and when you talk to them, you're putting them on the spot. Meaning you're asking them, hey, you have to make a decision. Do you want to listen to me? Do you not want to listen to me? Do you want to buy what I'm selling? Do you not want to buy what I'm selling? And they have to make a decision where it's very easy. If you compare that to, let's say, a product you're selling online, you have to click a button, put it in your cart, so to speak, as a simplistic example. With that, you can procrastinate. You can go, I'll come back and I'll think about it or whatever. You're not put on the spot. I think that cold calling is certainly appropriate in certain circumstances, and other things work better in different industries, et cetera. We forget sometimes in marketing that everything works sometimes, but nothing works all the time. So we've got to really find those 1, 2, or 3 different types of marketing that really work for our businesses and focus and put all our efforts into those. That's what we try to do anyway in our business.
Now, with the push for social and digital, you're always told create content, more content to remain top of mind. And then you think, how much more top of mind is a phone call? So it's interesting. Generally, nowadays, everyone is shy of using their phone, actually picking it up and making a call, even to people they know. It's like a text with an emoji and no actual words in it. So, really, it's a lost art, I think. And I'm so glad to have you here. For people who are starting out in cold calling, you said B2B, primarily for B2B and for probably high ticket. I think the thing that people would want to know is scripts for cold calling. Do you create a script? What are the best things to say?
Yeah, no, it's a big subject, but it's interesting because we still, all these years later, write scripts for our clients every day and help them with that. There certainly is an art to it, like anything else. It's just like advertising. It's about messaging. Some people say you can't really use a script because every conversation is different and that sort of thing. I don't know how many salespeople have told me that over the years, and I've trained hundreds of them. The truth is that we all use scripts when we're talking on the phone, when we're walking down the street, talking to our friends or a stranger. You probably got a pat response that you say, oh, I'm good, great, how are you? Or whatever. You have something that you say repetitively that you've gotten into a habit to say. You're using a script. The question really is not, are we using a script on the telephone, let's say, or in person? What matters is it intentional? Have we thought about what that script is going to be in advance? And have we practiced that? And we thought about the wording that we're using? Because a lot of times people will start off And they think, I don't really need to use a script. I'm just going to go with the flow. And so, for instance, a first phone call, they say it one way. Then maybe the second phone call, pretty much their brain goes back to what they just did. And so they say a similar thing. Maybe they tweak a word or two. The third phone call, same kind of thing. By the 10th phone call, they're saying the exact same thing, but they haven't necessarily thought about the words that they're using. We all use script in whatever we do in our daily basis. And you absolutely do need to use them when it comes to telephone sales in particular or in person. As I said, this is a big subject, but the most important thing with scripts in my mind anyway, that we really focus on is simplicity. Let's face it, when you're cold calling, you're interrupting somebody. You need to get to the point very quickly, and you need not to waste their time. And you need to understand that, and this is going to sound bad, but they don't care about you. They don't know who you are, and you're the one interrupting them, and you're doing them a favor, at least from their perspective. We've got to get there quickly, and we've got to give them a reason to listen to us further. Getting that message out very quickly in the initial part of the call, which with the right wording and the right approach, you can do that. It's just you have to look at things from the prospect's perspective, not our perspective, which is so important in sales and marketing to start off with, but we forget that sometimes. What we don't want to do is get on the phone and say, hey, this is Robert with Total Business Results. We've been in business for 22 years and we help clients do this and that. And we want an award for something else when we can do this that nobody cares. They want to know is what can I do for them? Hope that gives you an idea of some of the important things anyway when it comes to cold calling.
Thank you for that example, because somebody listening, including myself, was probably thinking, oh, I'll just call and say exactly what you just said. Do not call and do that. So it's always important to know what not to do, just in case our brains naturally go to doing exactly what we're not supposed to do.
You figure it out.
You get enough hangups and then you're like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that, Robert. I'm thinking about small business owner who's starting out. Is there some prep work when you're going into an interview? Is it the same kind of prep work with the phone call, or not so much because of the volume of phone calls that you need to make?
Like any good attorney would say, it depends. What I mean is that it really depends on the size of your market, who you're calling. For instance, let's say, again, I'm going to use the US as an example because I'm familiar with it, of course. Let's say there's only 150 businesses in the entire country who are my target clients, my prospect. Then I can spend and should spend plenty of time researching each and every one of those. I want to find out as much as I can about a prospect. Do they have a family? Do they have pets? Are they into sport? Anything we can come up with. Versus if we have a million potential customers out there, then we don't have time to do that. There are things, because we got so many great data tools and everything these days, that you can get some kind of inside information literally on the spot. But in general, it really depends on your market size, if you will, as far as preparation before the phone call. Because like you said, when you're trying to go through a lot of numbers, what cold calling is about numbers, and you can't be slowed down and we talk to 3 people an hour, spend the next 15 years trying to get a sale. So it's a balance there, if you will.
Cold calling is a numbers game. Ideally, like you said, you gave the example of 3 calls in an hour. No. What is maybe an average, I'll just say, for someone in your line of business or in a line of business that you're familiar with for an hour?
Our callers probably do about 60 calls an hour. That doesn't mean they actually connect with 60 people. That means they are dialing 60 to 70 times an hour, and they may get through to 10 to 15 people. These particular callers are doing lead generation and appointment setting, which is a little bit different. So if you're a small business owner and you're trying to set an appointment with somebody, that's less time consuming, so you can dial faster. You might be able to dial 40 or 50 people an hour. It takes practice. Maybe that's a little bit much for somebody starting out, but versus if you're actually trying to sell somebody something on that first phone call, then it's going to take longer. And so you may only get 20 to 30 dials done in an hour. So that's where I would say the difference is if you're doing lead generation and appointment setting versus selling a product or service on the spot. That's really what's going to drive the speed of your calls.
Then you mentioned that you want to get to the point quickly. And you gave us an example of what not to do. So don't tell them about how you've been in business for X amount of years and how you did this and you won this award and you're known for this. Do not do that. Maybe you can give me an example of what does getting to the point quickly look like?
Yes, absolutely. A great example that I've always liked because it was so obvious in the United States back in 2008, when President Obama was elected, we had a change in our healthcare system where the government, they called it, what was it, the Affordable Care Act. It was basically a lot of regulation. The government got involved in the healthcare system and the insurance side of it, which had never been before. Because it was such a huge undertaking, it confused a lot of businesses. There were penalties involved if you got wrong, and there was a lot of fear in the market. At the time, we had a lot of insurance agent clients that would sell health insurance. So we were calling on their behalf. And so we would call business owners and say, I'm sure you're aware of all the changes that are going on with the new ACA law. We found a lot of people are getting penalized and fined because they don't know what's going on. So use that concept of a little bit of fear. Suddenly they're listening to you now because they think, wow, I don't want to be fined. So maybe I should listen to this person that's calling me. And so it was a great way to get somebody to perk up and go, oh, yeah, okay, yes, I do want to talk to the insurance agent you're recommending because I don't know about this. I don't want to get fined. But finding something that's a hot button or something that gets somebody's attention very quickly. It can be anything. If you're selling something to do with cybersecurity, throwing out a statistic that, boy, I have no idea what the numbers are, but let's just say 25% of companies last year suffered some sort of intrusion or hack when we help people prevent that or that sort of thing. So anything that gets somebody's attention, those are the best kind that allow you to get into the conversation where they're actually listening to you versus hanging up.
You've given them a reason to listen in that opening line. So I'm thinking in terms of developing a script, is it that you're testing different opening lines before you develop your actual script? What does the process look like?
Because we do this for a living, it's a little bit easier for us. We have almost templates of formulas of how we do it, but it does take testing. And particularly, like, I'll give you an example. When we enter a new industry that we haven't called for before, we've got a basic idea of the structure. Basically, you're opening up with, hey, this is John Smith or Mary Smith, whoever. This is my company, and this is why you should listen to me. And then after that, hey, if you're going for the appointment, can we set an appointment? So it's a very quick type of thing. But you do have to test that middle line right after the introduction of yourself. They're not listening to you. They don't care about you. They didn't even hear what you said as far as your name or the name of the company. Trust me, they've never remember. But they are paying attention to that next line. Let's take the cyber hacking example. If you say that to somebody and you're repeatedly getting no reaction, that nobody seems to care or they're confused by it, the wording or something, that's when you want to start to tweak those lines. So it's that part of the script that you have to listen and get feedback. If you have people calling for you, get their feedback because you can hear it. We all know what it's like. Just like you can see the expression change on somebody's face, you can hear it in somebody's voice when you say the wrong thing, or you can tell when they're not listening to you. So it's a matter of tweaking that middle part of the script that'll allow you to find what really clicks. Because again, just as much as you'll find out what doesn't work, when it finally does work, you'll hear it click literally and boom, like the light bulb goes off and you'll know, okay, we just hit it. That's it right there.
Oh, it sounds very exciting. Robert, like I said, it takes a special kind of person to be able to succeed in cold calling. You've seen so many people I'm sure who've been successful in it, or people who've come with a lot of excitement to do it and then just not been able to do it. The making of the mindset of someone who's going to make a success of cold calling, what things would you say people should work on?
You're right. Mindset is huge because cold calling from most people, it's very difficult. They get psyched out by the whole idea of it. But the biggest thing is shifting your mentality to realize what you're actually doing. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're a lead generator trying to get appointments or you're trying to sell something. If you actually believe that what you're doing is important and you believe that the other person on the other end of the phone needs what you're calling about, it makes it a much easier and less confrontational call. Even if they're not interested or they hang up. One of the things I've always taught my people is that if you have a list of, let's say you have 100 people on your list, if you've got a great product or service or some kind of solution that's going to change their lives, there's somebody on that list that needs it. And if you don't find the person, they're going to suffer because of that. It's your job to go through all the other people, do the detective work to find that person who needs what you're offering. And so if you're leaving them hanging, if you will, doing them a disservice if you don't find them. If you approach a cold call with that mentality that, hey, I got to get through these people to find the person that's waiting for me to help them, it makes it a much more pleasant, and it's easier to keep yourself going because yes, you're going to run into some crazy people. The world's full of them and not so nice people. But if you focus on the difference you're going to make in somebody's life and that they're sitting there waiting for you to talk to them, that really makes a big difference. And I think that's one of the things that have helped a lot of people that I've trained over the years really get past that concern about cold call.
Thank you for that. I'm going to push our audience a little bit forward. They start the cold calling. They know that this is important. They believe in what they're doing. They'll go through the many no's to get to the people who really need what they're after. And then you get into a cold calling slump. You're not getting the responses that you were getting initially, or as business cycles or whatever happens. What has been your method to get back in the game, or how do you get your people to not be like, ah, I'm done with this. This is just too hard. How do they get back in the game?
It's interesting because it seems like so simplistic, but I'll tell you what the biggest thing is back to the basics is starting over. Just like it was your first day cold calling. And the reason is because typically when we go through slumps, some of that is the nature of cold calling. There's going to be peaks and valleys, of course, but anything that's protracted to more than a short period of time, something has changed. And as humans, particularly with a skill, cold calling is extremely repetitive, obviously. And so as humans, we get bored very easily. Our minds get bored. That's why it takes a lot of discipline to be able to repetitively do the same thing. So what we tend to do as humans is we'll tweak things, we'll change things as we go along, just because our brain is bored and we won't even realize it. And so a lot of times I've found people who are going through slumps, they've changed something. They've lost the enthusiasm in their voice. They've stopped asking certain questions, or they've gotten lazy about certain parts of a script, or they've slowed down their dials, or they are changing their routine in the morning before they're getting on the phone. Something has changed. And so the most important thing is to go back to where you were, like you're starting off, and say, okay, something has changed here. Let's go back to the basics and fix it. I tell you, I've yet to find a situation where that wasn't the case, where somebody didn't realize, you know what, I've changed. I'm using my voice differently, or I started getting sloppy on the script, or I started making my calls in the late afternoon instead of in the morning, or any number of things. And that's really what makes a difference, believe it or not. Something as simple as that.
That's going to be really helpful to people who are listening when they do encounter those things. Robert, please. You mentioned it just now when you were speaking about tips for successful cold calling. I heard you say a friendly voice. And I said, oh, okay. Let's get some tips for how to be successful in cold calling.
When you're meeting somebody in person, body language picks up for a lot of that communication. The problem is over the phone in particular, you lose a big portion of your communication and your energy. Very easy to come across almost dead on the phone. I'll give you an example, but it was probably 1996, 97. I was doing real estate and I had a coach that was training me how to cold call in real estate. He was actually one of the biggest trainers in the United States at the time. I sent him a recording of making a few calls, and he sent back the recording and he said, "You sound absolutely dead on the phone." And I thought, wow, that's pretty harsh. But in fact, I looked at it, and what he meant was that I'd lost the enthusiasm, the energy you have to make up for the body language that you lose when talking over the phone. And energy is one of the most important things. As we know, I've heard this repeatedly about people who do infomercials or any kind of film type of stuff, that you have to amp up your energy, exaggerate everything, so that almost that you feel funny doing it, because the camera, or in this case, the phone, takes away a good percentage of that energy. And to the other person, on the other end of it, if you're really super animated, you feel like you're energetic and you're just all over the place and you feel uncomfortable, you probably sound normal to that other person on the other end of the phone. It's a weird type of thing to train yourself to do, but we have to intentionally do that. We have to create that extra energy. I used to do most of my calls standing up, because moving around, music in the background, because that body movement helps that energy. If the other person on the other end of the phone could have seen that, it would be pretty funny, but you can't get away with that on video. But things like that help you keep that energy actually just makes you normal by increasing your energy, if you will.
That's a great tip. And I love how you said you'll be feeling so animated and then it comes across as normal to be greeted by a warm, friendly voice. It's always good. I know that you often speak about how to go from being an operator to being an owner. And for someone who either has a small team or is a solopreneur, oftentimes you hear that message and then you completely switch off because you're like, we're like three people. How am I going to go from being an operator to an owner? I just thought it'd be interesting to get your take on that.
I do talk about that topic a lot because I think it's so important and it's very near and dear to my heart because of what I went through. And it is a question that a lot of people ask, particularly, like you said, solopreneurs or people who maybe only have one employee or a contractor. As we all know in business, first of all, it's so critical that we build a team of people who are doing the things that we aren't necessarily good at. The problem is that people tend to think, oh, geez, I can't afford to hire employees and all that kind of stuff. And that's not really what I mean. You can create a team by having several different contractors. You can have a contractor who does social media postings for you, another one who does copywriting, or basically the things that you're not good at in your business. That's what you want to outsource. And you can use contractors to do that. But the important thing is, even with those contractors, you need to build a team of people who actually believe in what you're doing. And it doesn't matter if they're contractors or employees, because study after study has shown that money is not the number one driver when it comes to people's enjoyment of what they're doing for a living. Is to do with growth, and it's about part of being something bigger. So if we can create a group of people, even if they're contractors, they can be on the other side of the world. But if they believe in what you're doing as a company, they feel part of that. You're almost a movement, if you will, and they're a part of that movement. It doesn't matter what their employment status is. They will do more and they will treat the business like their own, because what we want to do is create a bunch of what I call mini owners. It doesn't mean that they're financially an owner of the company, but they have the mentality like it's their company. And so if we get that culture with contractors or employees, it doesn't matter. That's what really turns us into a business owner and creates an asset as a business, regardless if it's just us and we have no employees, just contractors, or if we have 100 employees. It's the same concept. And I think that's where a lot of people, like you said, they turn off because they think, oh, geez, I don't have any employees and I can't afford that right now. But it really doesn't matter. It's the same concept, regardless of what size you are as a business.
Stepping into that leadership role as the owner, we spend so much time being operators. You even forget that you are responsible for the overarching vision and the leadership of what you're doing because you're so deep in the weeds of doing the work that you forget that this is your business. You are the leader. You have a vision. You're the one who has to create, like you said, this movement to get people excited in the culture. And just because you're one person or you're two people, still, this is what we're aiming for. And you said because of what happened to you. I know we're way over time now. Do you mind telling us what happened to you, if that's okay?
Yes, absolutely. Real quickly, as I mentioned, I had a business partner, or maybe I didn't mention that we started that company into the cold calling aspect of it. We started in 2001. And so we grew it from zero through cold calling also to millions of dollars in sales. In 2017, real quickly, I came to work one day and my business partner didn't. And it turns out he had a heart attack the day before. And so I went from a situation where I had a business partner and he was my crutch, because when I was out, he could handle things. When he was out, I could handle things. When I got married, I took a 3-week honeymoon and didn't even think about it. I called in the office. They said, "Why are you calling?" I had a lot of freedom. I made it to where the business was functioning without me. And then suddenly in one day, boom, I'm back to being in charge of the company. And it was completely reliant on me. No longer could I take 3 weeks off. In fact, I couldn't even take a day off because I was responsible for everything. I had nobody else at that same level, ownership level, to do those things. I went through a period of time really struggling to try to figure out, how do I get back my freedom? How do I become a business owner instead of an operator? That's the problem. A lot of us get into entrepreneurship because we want to set our own schedule. We want freedom. We want unlimited income. And then you ask somebody 2 or 3 years afterwards, after they start, oh, how's that going for you? And usually it's, I'm working longer hours. I can't take a day off. And this didn't turn out like I thought. So I went through that transition. And that's really a passion of mine these days, because I think so many of us lose that freedom very quickly as we get into entrepreneurship, which is the whole goal in the first place.
Thank you for sharing that. It sounds like a very difficult time. Thank you for sharing that lesson with us. And I think we need to talk another time, if possible. That will be great. Thank you so much, Robert. To our audience, please, can you go to www.totalbusinessresults.com/private coaching? And if you'd like to connect with Robert, where can they connect with you best?
The social media, of course, I'm on most of the major platforms, is usually under the Robert Poole, like a swimming pool with an E on the end. YouTube channels, there's a lot of video on there that your audience might find valuable. And if you want to reach out, you can always, I'll give you my direct email. You can email me at robert@operatortoowner.net. And I'd be more than happy to set up a call or chat with you if you have any questions about particularly that concept of operator to owner, which I'm really passionate about.
Thank you, Robert.